still on national security and defence, but closer to home, retired Major General, now Senator Jim Molan, also my dad, sat down with me yesterday to give us an update on how he is. Critical issues out of Senate estimates and Remembrance Day. Well, Dad, great to see you and great to have you back on the show. First question I need to ask is, how are you?
I'm not too bad today. I'm in the middle of chemo at the moment, and I've got 10 sessions of chemo at 3-week intervals, and I'm on the 4th session. And chemo's interesting because it gives you the first week and a bit you get side effects, and then for the last week and a bit you feel quite human. So I had it yesterday, and I still feel quite human today. But I thought, and I haven't been on the media. I've been staying very low. My priority at the moment is to try and get better, is to beat the cancer. But I thought, given the fact that we've just had a week of estimates, I thought it might be worth chatting about a few issues.
Senate estimates, first of all, what is it for people who might not really understand?
Well, estimates is a period of time after a budget which is put aside so that the opposition has more time to directly question officials and politicians. The problem is that so much in defence is classified, that if an official or a minister finds that they're talking about a classified issue that they know is classified, then all they have to say to not answer it is, I'm sorry, that's classified, we can't discuss it.
Wouldn't almost everything under the national security defence umbrella be classified to a degree?
Almost everything except what comes out as in the budget papers, and not much comes out in the budget papers, I can assure you. And the first point I brought up really was what I think is the single most important point, which I knew couldn't be answered, but which should be answered somewhere in the parliamentary process. And that is, what war are you preparing for?
Well, how can we prepare for something if we don't know what it is? And if they do know what it is, how can we as Australians have faith that they're preparing for the right war if everything's classified?
So essentially there's a fascinating difference between the way the Americans do this and the way we do this. The Americans put out a national security strategy, publish it. There's a classified version for their very classified areas, but they put out something which is vaguely like our white paper, but not really our white paper. And then the defence under that puts out a national defence strategy. And the President always writes the introduction to it. And the President wrote the introduction to the last one, and this is what he said about openness. He said, and I'll quote it because it gives a real difference in attitude. If our giant alliance partner can do this, why can't we? And the quote is, the Department of Defence owes it to our all-volunteer force and the American people to provide a clear picture of the challenges we expect to face in the crucial years ahead. And we owe them a clear and rigorous strategy for advancing our defence and security goals. And I think that's very, very important. There is a way of doing this
that doesn't compromise us, but allows them to be held accountable.
Correct. And rather than not speak about it and trust governments, and governments of both sides can do what they want to do without bringing the parliament in or the people in. But the example that I quote all the time is the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, which is a statutory body, and it is effective and fascinating and very hard-working. What we need is a PJCIS-like body, which would be a statutory body, which allows the full classification, as the PJCIS does, which allows the full classification of everything in defence to be told, so that we have some input into strategy as the representatives of the people. There is an answer.
Money is a big part of this equation as well, how much the government is willing to spend, how much it has to spend. You propose a levy, essentially.
I haven't proposed it yet, but what the Prime Minister came out and said to us about a week ago, in fact the weekend before estimates started, in an interview, came out and said whatever it takes, they will pay for.
That was in The Australian, I think.
Correct.
With Greg Sheridan.
Correct. Whatever it takes, they will pay for. And the question that I asked in estimates is, do we have any idea of of how much it's going to take. In the Second World War, we were spending 30% to 60% of our GDP on defence. Suppose it costs $80 billion a year. How are we going to raise $80 billion given 4 or 5 high priorities such as health and NDIS and other things which must be funded? And the only thing I could come to was, are we going to do it like we did with the Medicare and do a Medicare levy? It takes a nation to defend a nation. Maybe we should all put in a little bit and then we can keep spending on other things as well. Hard for a Liberal to say because one of our creeds is being a low taxing government, except in times of national emergency, which I think we're in now.
Do you think that would go down like a lead balloon amongst Australians, or do you think they would understand potentially a need to contribute?
It's a very good question. And on the issue of defence, I think the level of complacency, which you've spoken about often, and I speak about it often, is very, very high. Defence and national security is something which the government has got to engender within the people.
Remembrance Day.
Yes, I couldn't even go to the Remembrance Day ceremonies at my local Queanbeyan area because I was actually being treated with the chemo at the time, so someone represented me.
Your daughter, Felicity.
My daughter and her serviceman husband.
Your second favourite daughter.
Exactly, yes, my second favourite daughter. They went along and they represented me, and it was fabulous to see. But what can we do for them? Well, there's a lot of practical things we can do for them. We owe them a lot. But what I try and do mainly is I spend a period of time thinking of those people who didn't come back and thinking of those who did come back and who were changed. And my father came back, your grandfather came back from the war, and I don't think he ever really settled back into civilian life again. But many came back and they didn't come back as the same person. No, and I think of them as well.
And their families, I think, suffered almost as much as anyone. I want to ask you just quickly about Grandpa, because at the time, now we have this incredible awareness of mental health and about post-traumatic stress syndrome and all those kind of things that are so real. But at the time, did you and your family understand what was going on?
No, we didn't. It was also complicated by alcohol and various things like that. I don't think we thought about it, and the person who paid the greatest price, of course, is the mother.
Yeah. Not going to war would be another great way, wouldn't it, to protect our future veterans?
And there's a very easy way of ensuring that. To deter war, you must be strong, and if you are weak, you're merely inviting trouble. And at the moment, we are weak and we've got to become strong. And I certainly hope that the Defence Strategic Review sees this in proportion and gets us in the next few years to be a very strong country which can deter war in our region.
Well, if we're looking for inspiration as a country, we need look no further than you.
Thank you.
The strongest. Thank you, Dad. That was amazing.